This weekend, international leaders will convene, virtually, of course, for the Group of 20 Leaders Summit. Saudi Arabia is hosting, and the focus will be how to steer the global economy through the rest of the pandemic. Bloomberg international government reporter David Weiner is here now with more on what we can expect from the two-day event. David, it's great to have you back here.
Great to be here.
It's going to be a virtual event, the first virtual G20. What are the implications of that?
Well, you know, so much of what's going on in our world, the top problems that we're facing are transnational, right? We're talking about climate change, the pandemic, migration. The big problems of our world today can't be resolved by one country. You need leaders to get together in one room, behind closed doors, and talk about these things. But when you're doing it over Zoom, it's just going to be a lot harder to deal with that.
We've seen a big change in the way that countries cooperate internationally, just the way the pandemic has played out, because there's been this fight for resources, specifically PPE and resources made in Asia that the world has wanted. How does that provide some sort of tension as to what these leaders will experience virtually at the G20, and how has it kind of changed the narrative for the way that nations cooperate?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you know, for the G20 to work, you kind of need the G2 to have some level of discussion, and for that to work.
And you're talking about the U.S. and China, of course.
And you know, you've got the two largest economies, the two most powerful nations in the world, can't even talk to each other right now. I mean, the relations are at the lowest point they've been since Nixon made the decision to make an opening towards China. So it's kind of hard to imagine the G20 really coming up with some bold action when you have these two big countries fighting for resources, you know, blaming each other over tariffs. And of course, you know, we're in the middle of a transition period too here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think transition period is painting sort of a nice picture of it. We're in the middle of, you know, of the president essentially attacking the foundations of the institutions of the democracy here in the U.S. I wonder how that plays into this weekend, because it really changes the way that the world is viewing us right now. We've had a host of leaders around the world congratulate President-elect Biden, but at the same time, the president himself hasn't done that.
Right. This is, I mean, a historical aberration. It's unprecedented, you know, the level of chaos that we're seeing in our transition right now. And of course, for, you know, U.S. rivals like China or Russia, this is great news. I mean, America divided. America can't even agree. We've got two presidents right now, right? So that's great for them. I think leaders like Angela Merkel and Macron are like looking at their partner and saying, you know, please get your act together.
Do you think that this changes the way that democracies or aspiring democracies around the world view us? This is America. I mean, Pompeo is literally this week flying around the world, you know, quote unquote, promoting democracy in places like the country of Georgia, which is ironic for a large number of reasons. How does this change the way the world is viewing us?
I think it's a real big question. I mean, you mentioned Pompeo. He was just in Israel, and he went over to the settlements, and he toured parts of the West Bank, you know, and the Golan, places that, you know, even Israel has not fully decided on, you know, where Israel stands on them. But I think, you know, we're going to have to see what happens in these next 2 months. America can still sort of restore that image, but it's going to be complicated.
I wonder about the format of the G20 this year. As we mentioned, it's the first time it's going to be virtual. Does that change the way world leaders view Trump? I mean, he's had this sort of intimidating presence at these in the past. We've seen photos and images from the past of him working his way to the front for these photo ops, and these, you know, interactions in person with other leaders that have become storylines in themselves.
Well, at this point right now, it's not even clear if he's going to even appear virtually. So absolutely, I mean, we're not going to have, you know, Trump imposing himself. You know, you've already seen the U.S. Kind of not making a big deal about some of the climate pledges that they're talking about. So Trump is kind of absent here. That's the big picture. And, you know, we know that the only thing he's doing right now is looking at his Twitter feed and looking at his options, you know, with the presidential, you know, with his refusal to, you know, concede.
It might be in the same place in a couple of weeks, if last week has been any judge. David Weiner, Bloomberg international government reporter, thanks so much for coming by Quicktake today. We appreciate it.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quicktake now for insight in an instant.